Hi, this is Professor Green, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 15, Global Production and Supply Chain. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is a pretty exciting chapter because it's such a focal piece of our course this semester. The learning objectives that we talk about here are explaining why global production and supply chain decisions are of central importance to many global economies, right? Why is it so important? Well, as you'll see, it's a key piece to revenue. Explain how country differences and product technology and production factors all affect the choice of where you want to locate. As we just saw, the Taiwanese semiconductor company just opened up 2 huge production facilities in Arizona, right? Why Arizona? Why not Taiwan? Obviously, a big question. Recognizing how the role of foreign subsidiaries can be enhanced over time as they accumulate knowledge. Right, as we saw with Starbucks and things, how they can pick up information from the local country. Identifying the factors that influence a firm decision whether to source supplies from within the company or from foreign suppliers, right, in-house or outsourcing, a big question. And then understanding the functions of logistics and purchasing, otherwise known as sourcing, within the global supply chains. We'll hear from some great guest speakers this semester detailing how that works today. And then lastly, describing what is required to efficiently manage a global supply chain. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to share my screen here again. Whoops. Okay, so the opening case talks about China and the world's manufacturing hub in the wake of the trade wars and COVID-19. And so as we've seen, when we go out to Long Beach port, if you were there in March of 2019, you'd see all these ships just stopped at the port, right? Because everything just kind of shut down and they couldn't move product from one place to another. It was an amazing sight, right? Very often you see ships coming and going, 2 to 3 out in the sea. But if you went to Long Beach during that time, you'd see 20, 30, maybe hundreds at one point of ships not being able to come into port because of the restrictions. So we saw that in 2018, China accounted for over 28% of global manufacturing output. Personally, I thought that was actually higher because I feel like everything I have is from China, but it's just 28%. It's responsible for 13.5% of global exports. And China became the second largest economy, obviously. We've talked about that already in this course, and growing. But these recent event talks about our dependence on China, right? That's what that trade war was all about between US and China. Trump saying that we're getting too dependent on China and they might not necessarily have the US best intentions at heart. So he was really adamant about making sure that we outsourced to other countries besides China. And there, as I said, production delays and supply chain. So let's go ahead and keep going here. The next slide talks about, well, this is a picture of what it looks like if you ever go to Long Beach Port, just like this. When I was in high school, or when I grew up on Long Island, I lived in the town next door to the Merchant Marine Academy. And this is what those people are trained to do, to drive and move these ships around the world. Really, can be an exciting career. So this chapter talks about where to locate the production activities. So, right, why China? Why not another country? What are the long-term strategic goals of role and goals of that site? We'll get into that in just a minute. Whether to own or outsource these facilities. IKEA now, as we see in the chapter, owns actually a site or 2 in China, but they outsource still a lot of production. How to manage a globally dispersed and the IT that goes into that, which is obviously such a big piece of that right now. I am Swiss, and so I didn't work directly for ABB, which is a Swiss and Swedish company, but they do a lot of that with the software and the hardware that goes into production. And I lived in Switzerland in one of the major towns where ABB is headquartered, and I had a lot of friends who worked for them. Whether to manage global logistics again or to outsource. A lot of big questions here. So there are two major value creation activities, the production, so how you make the product, and then how you move the product, the supply chain management. So just to differentiate the two, when we talk about supply chain, then we talk about either purchasing it from your supplier or moving it logistically. There are some strategic objectives of the production and logistic function here. So we want to lower costs at the end of the day, right? We want to keep our revenue high. And when we talk about supply chain, there are two major vocabulary words that we just want to identify ahead of time: upstream and downstream. Upstream being the suppliers, sometimes known as the inbound supply chain. You'll hear our guest speakers talk about this, or the downstream. And this is when you get trying to get the product to the customer. So you're giving it to your distributor, your wholesaler, your supplier, also known as your outbound supply chain. And this key term here, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides, quality, refers to reliability. And why is that so important? Because you save money, right? We want to increase our profits. So improving performance reliability, when we improve our quality, it increases the productivity, it lowers rework and scrap costs, lowers warranty costs. So you don't want products coming back. As I said a few times, probably in this course, that I did a project in business school where I worked the automotive industry and working with an engineering consulting company and helping them do that outsourcing that warranty process for the large manufacturers like BMW, Volkswagen, et cetera, because there's a lot of money that goes into the process when you take your tires back or when you take your brakes back to get replaced under warranty. So if we go backwards here, lowering the warranty cost lowers those service costs, right, which increases profits. But if we increase productivity and we lower the rework and scrap costs, then we also lower the manufacturing costs. TQM is a key term, management philosophy with a central focus on improving quality. There are two main ideas or methodologies, I guess you can call them, when we talk about 2QM that have emerged in the 80s and 90s. Six Sigma was the big one. And you could get your black belt. When I graduated college in 1997, a lot of my engineering fellow colleagues, classmates went on to get their black belt. It came directly out of TQM. A production process would be 99.9966% accurate. And it came a lot from the Japanese auto manufacturers and then came into the United States. And as we saw that car coming through the supply chain, if it came out and it wasn't 99.9996 accurate, it would go back to be repaired because they did not want to put that out into the market because they knew that they would then have warranty issues. And, the Japanese really perfected this in many ways. Then a lot of companies that took this over were Motorola, GE, Honeywell, and, a really exciting place to be at that in the 80s and 90s, and it still exists today. In the EU, they decided to adopt a similar but a little bit different guideline called the ISO 9000. You'll see a lot of that stamp on a lot of products, scientific or products that need to be very precise. And this is similar but different. ISO 9000 is a little more bureaucratic. If you've ever worked for your European company, you'll realize that it's kind of difficult, let's say, to get this certification, to get a product through the certification. Can be costly to implement. But it definitely puts a focus on quality and making sure that the products that are completed come out in high quality. So let's talk about two other objectives for international companies. Production logistics functions, they must accommodate demands and local responsiveness. So this is all about, Coca-Cola slightly shifting the recipe from India to Mexico to the United States. And then also production and supply chain management respond quickly to shifts in customer demand. And the company that comes to mind is Shein, the company that makes clothing. They have far outpaced Zara and H&M when it comes to fast fashion, and yes, heavily criticized for, social injustice, not treating their employees correctly, but they are amazing when it comes to technology and supply chain. Supposedly they can move a design from the design phase to production within just a couple of days. That's why on their website you see hundreds of thousands different fashions. They always have the latest fashions. They say, they even steal designs from art students and copy the design, and then within a couple of days they're producing it, when usually that process takes months. And so, yeah, definitely necessarily the most ethical company, because they have been criticized for not treating their employees and the production facilities ethically. But at the same time, there is something to be learned from when we talk about supply chain. So let's shift now, talking about where to produce. And these are a lot of repeats from previous chapters, right? Location economies, right? Talking about political and economic systems, local externalities, presence of global concentration of activities, right? As we said, that's why Switzerland does so well with pharmaceuticals, because there are, between Germany and France, so many other vendors and companies that help them do that. Formal and informal trade barriers. I won't go through that again. We've talked about that a lot this course. Transportation costs, obviously, regulations affecting FDI, subsidies, taxes, etc. And expected future movements in exchange rates. We did a whole chapter on that, expecting if the currency of your home or your outsourced country is expected to move quickly. So there are also technological factors, some fixed costs that we want to talk about here. And it brings to mind the example of the semiconductors that they just set up in Arizona. And why was that such a big deal? Why did Biden go to congratulate this Taiwanese semiconductor company on setting up 2 major plants in Arizona? Well, okay, yes, it takes the focus away out of Taiwan, which is a little bit under threat from China, and moving back into a safer place in the United States. But more importantly, it's because a semiconductor plant needs, they say they estimate $5 billion to create an accurate semiconductor plant. So it's a high fixed costs. It's a big investment. So if the costs are very high, a firm might serve the world market from a single location or from very few locations. So again, we're very dependent on semiconductors in this day and age, and they have locations in Taiwan, but now they've chosen another location, and that is in Arizona. That's a big decision. If costs are low, then a firm might serve the world market from several locations at once, because that is to diversify, and that is a really nice option to have, because being too dependent on one location obviously can be quite risky. Now we'll talk a little bit about the minimum efficiency scale. We'll have a slide next on with a graph on what that looks like. And the author of this text has done a lot of work on studying this, economies of scale. This is where the level of output at which most plant level scale economies are exhausted. So you want to see now, when you start to lose economies of scale, when you kind of plateau, is not necessarily the best of places to be. And the larger the minimum efficiency of scale, the more likely centralized production makes sense. So if you can make a lot of material at one site for lower cost, then you want to invest in that place. So the next slide here has that graph, as I said. So as the unit costs go up, you'll see that right, that the minimum efficiency scale shows right here when the curve starts to shift and plateau with that volume. So the example that they give in the book, which I thought was a nice one, is personal computers. So they say that the minimum efficiency scale here is about 250,000 units per year, but the global demand is 35 million units. And so that's why Dell and Lenovo and a lot of computer companies have multiple locations, because 250,000 is just a really small portion of 35 million. And so because they can achieve that efficiency of sales so quickly, that they can actually have many, many locations closer to their customers, et cetera, places where they're cheaper to produce these things, et cetera. And so the next slide talks about also where to produce, and we talk more about these technological factors. The next one we talk about is a flexible manufacturing and mass customization. Again, I think of ABB, right? So flexible manufacturing enables a firm to produce a wide variety of end products at a unit cost that traditionally would require mass production of a standardized output. So this is known as lean production. And the four or so main pieces of lean production, why we want lean production, is reducing the setup times for complex equipment. We increase the utilization of machines through better scheduling. You can use them all 24 hours a day, not just certain times and certain shifts. Improving quality control, so you can check the product along the manufacturing process, and if it's something that's gone wrong, you can either throw it away or take it back and fix it. And this can lead to mass customization because, as we've seen in previous chapters, lots of different countries have different ideas for the products. As we saw with IKEA coming to the United States, we love IKEA here, but initially we did not love the small cups and the small things that were useful in the European countries where they initially set up. Lean production was actually kind of made somewhat famous by Toyota and one of their engineers called Taichi Ono. And he came to the United States seeing the automotive industry and seeing that there was so much room for improvement when it came to production. And so he set out to improve the quality and the production and made lean production maybe the famous thing that it is today. Famous in my world, or when we talk about international business. So another piece of technological factors, another common technology is the flexible machine cells. And I'm going to show you a video in just a minute. This is the grouping of various types of machinery and a common handler in a centralized cell controller. So there's like a room that has similar machines, and then they can then choose which machine and which robot to use by software, by computer, and then customize the product that they're trying to make. It's all about adopting flexible manufacturing technologies that can help the firm customize products again to meet the demands of small customer groups. So, let's go ahead and show this video. See that it's right. It's self-production. All these different robots around, here we go. Finish up this section. We just one or two more slides. And so we have, we want to look at product values, the value to weight ratio, and, what are the universal needs? Locating production facilities. Do you want to do a centralized or decentralized? Centralized, fixed costs are substantial. And your minimum efficiency scale is high, right? Not computers. And the flexible manufacturing technologies are potentially available so that you can then customize in that one location. But decentralizing, you want to be close to your major markets, so you have lower transportation costs. The fixed costs, the minimum efficiency scale are low, as I talked about with laptops and computers, and appropriate flexible manufacturing technologies are not available. So you don't have that option. There's a nice couple of tables here that summarize what we just spoke about. The country factors here, political economy, cultural factor, and then the two different options, concentrated versus decentralized. So if you are a manager having to make this decision, these are some check boxes that you'll want to go through and include in your report, especially if you're an MBA student and you're creating a report for this course. You want to make sure that you review these tables. Also, the technological factors, as we spoke about, efficiency of scale, are there flexible manufacturing technologies? And then the last piece, production factors, value to weight ratio. Is it that will make it high or low when it comes to transportation costs? And then if it serves universal needs. So I'm going to go ahead and end. We have just one more slide. I want to talk about where to produce. Before we move on to make or buy decisions. Here we talk about multinationals trying to capture the gains that come with this dispersed global production. There's global learning, right? Valuable knowledge might be found in companies' foreign subsidiaries I've spoken about in this course. You might have an offshore factory, a source factory, a server factory, contributor factory, outpost factory, and a lead factory. These are, all different types of factories when it comes to supply chain. But this is what I wanted to cover here, the hidden cost of foreign locations, right? High employee turnover, as we see often in India. They hire engineers there, but they're not loyal to the organization because they can very quickly get experience and then move on to another organization for a higher salary. So they've had a lot of issues, and a lot of companies have now come back to the United States because they've spent so much in training employees and then having the employee leave. That'd be shoddy workmanship, right? We want to make sure that when we have things manufactured, especially in Asia, that the quality is there, poor product quality, and low productivity. You might have some factories that are not producing as much as you'd like them to. So let's go ahead and end this part, and we'll start again in part 2 in the next video. Thank you for joining me here from Prague in the Czech Republic.